Right now, we want to dig deeper into tonight's debate, winners, losers, and what all those hot topics really mean for us here in California.
Joining us, Republican consultant Rob Stutzman and Democratic consultant Andrew Acosta.
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen, both so much for joining us and for sharing your insights tonight. This was really a big chance for both candidates to introduce themselves to voters on a national stage. We all know that one of the cardinal rules of being a vice presidential candidate is to do no harm to their running mate. So the question tonight, did they live up to that standard? What are some of your initial thoughts? Rob, we'll start with you.
Well, I don't know if they did any harm, but I think Walz fundamentally failed tonight. Walz coined the term about Vance and Trump that they're weird. He never prosecuted a case tonight, standing next to J.D. Vance, that J.D. Vance is weird. He never attacked him enough. He allowed this very civil debate to unfold, which frankly was nice to watch from a citizen's perspective. But politically, it allowed the Trump-Vance ticket to be normalized in a way that the Harris-Walz campaign does not want them to be normalized. And I think he fundamentally failed the mission.
Interesting. Andrew, your thoughts?
Well, I think Rob has a point. I mean, I think one would think that the governor of Minnesota would be able to make the case a little bit more. He made 3 or 4 points, one on choice, trusting a woman and their doctor, one on the wall that, there was a wall that was supposed to be built by Trump and paid for by Mexico that never happened, and then calling out Trump for his concept of a health plan and saying as a 4th grade teacher that wouldn't fly in his classroom. But there were a lot of things he whiffed on, and this is, sort of that coaching kids in football. Don't fumble. I think he fumbled a few times.
Okay, you mentioned coach, right? So let's do it, huh? What grade would you give each of the candidates? And then talk about whether it really matters to the overall race at all. In so many ways, it seems this has been kind of a rah-rah, or to kind of build the team on each side, if you will. How much will this impact the actual race?
Minimal. I mean, but the race is on, these minimal margins mean a lot, because in some of these states it matters a lot. Not so much here in California, where I'm sure a lot of people were watching it with their minds already made up. But, were they looking for Walz to really go at J.D. Vance? That didn't happen. I think as Rob's point, this could have been a, PBS debate in Minnesota from 2000, because it was very cordial afterwards. Everyone was hugging and high-fiving. And so it didn't have the vibe that you've seen from the Trump, some of these other Trump events where he's, spewing out vitriol about immigration. It was a lot more tempered than that.
And what grade do you give each?
I think Walz maybe a B-, and I would give J.D. Vance probably A-.
Well, I was thinking C- for Walz and maybe
You're
a B+. I am still a tougher curve over here. But Vance, it's interesting because this is not the J.D. Vance that goes on conservative bro podcasts and is much more inflammatory. He did, after all, invent the Springfield, Ohio, or repeated that meme, which then, of course, Trump repeated again, which always turned out to be, false. And again, I guess go back to Walz. I think he fell into Midwest nice. I think he was nervous. He found comfort in that. But I think fundamentally, Harris headquarters is probably a little disappointed tonight. One other quick thing about if this matters. J.D. Vance tonight talked a lot about energy, and he said drill baby drill several times. That is directly at the voters of Western Pennsylvania, who may very well decide the presidency. And so I saw a lot of what Vance did tonight. I thought was very strategic in terms of just the handful of states that are going to matter and decide who wins this election.
And that's very interesting. So speaking of the battleground states, and to your point, Andrew, their cordialness tonight, they're both from the Midwest. They are both veterans. They were both brought on the ticket to really appeal to Midwest voters, those battleground states. But for us here in California, did any of their messages really resonate for us here? We'll start with you, Rob.
Well, I think they may. Look, California doesn't matter for presidential. California matters for who's going to control the House of Representatives. There are 6 to 7 races up and down the state that are completely in dead heats right now, and that'll determine who wins. Well, that goes to a lot about turnout, and that goes to, where's their enthusiasm in the base? Which party has more excitement, is going to turn voters out? And tonight's interesting. I think Vance does breathe energy and substance, which Trump lacks, but substance into the Republican platform that I think helps embolden Republican voters.
So smoothing out some rough edges there, potentially.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, tonight was very substantive. I mean, we should give them credit for that. We're critiquing some of their political objectives, but from a policy perspective, a lot of substantive discussion. They should be applauded for that. The moderators should be as well, and it gives substance and policy shape to a Republican agenda that Donald Trump doesn't shape at all, because he doesn't speak about policy and substance.
Right. I think if an alien came down and watched this debate, they would think, wow, this Trump ticket seems really good. Because they wouldn't know what Trump is, right? And if Trump was half as good as J.D. Vance in the last debate, we'd be having a different conversation about the presidential, but Trump has no discipline. And I think if they didn't know much about J.D. Vance, they're going to get a good dose of this guy seems to have his stuff together. And I think that's going to come through. It's going to be hard to say he doesn't know what he's talking about, but it depends. I mean, Democrats will pick and say he didn't answer the question about January 6th, which is all fair. But overall, I think it's going to be hard to come out of this that he wasn't composed, polished, and knew what he was talking about on the issues.
And yet so much of this stuff is about the clips that they play the next day, right? The things that go viral, if you will. And I think that each campaign maybe will have 2 or 3 things that they will be playing over and over again. What do you think that will be for each campaign? Of course, we know abortion will play prominently.
Yeah, I think the Democrats, and I saw they're dial testing this, and I think that answer from Walz in terms of trusting a woman and her doctor was an issue that pops, and I think they'll use that again and again. Clearly, the January 6th piece where he refused to answer will be fodder. But there's the other thing, I mean, Walz had some questions where he should have been prepared, and he seemed to, have a hard time answering things that they knew was coming. And I think that will play into, is he ready for prime time? Does he embellish things? And that will be probably on Fox News more so.
Yeah, Walz could not answer the question directly as to why he embellished the story about when he was in China during the Tiananmen Square massacre. And he eventually referred to himself as a knucklehead. That's going to be a very viral moment tomorrow.
Knucklehead, he says he sometimes can misspeak, but he kind of has the best intentions, if you will. Are there some final reflections? We got literally seconds left. Some final thoughts that you will take away from this debate?
Well, final thoughts are, it was a policy debate where 2 men were actually having a conversation about issues, and there was civility in the room.
Yeah, I think it was healthy for our body politic that there was that type of civility and substance. But as we've discussed, probably not the political objective that the Democrats wanted tonight.
5 weeks till Election Day. Those mail-out ballots have already really started to come in. Yeah. Well, thank you, gentlemen, both so much for sharing your insights on this important debate with us. We'll speak to you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.